welcome to Vlogmas Day 11. That's right, it is Day 11 for Vlogmas, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to submit your podcast to podcast directories. So, first thing is if you don't submit your podcast to directories, no one's going to really be able to find you. Sure, if you tell them to go to your website, they will be able to find you. However, if you open up your app and you try to type in your podcast name, they're not going to find you. So, in order to get them to find you on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, things like that, you need to submit to the directories. So, there's about 3 or 4 major directories that I would say that you need to submit to. And the first thing is you need to find your RSS feed. So that's like I was talking about in the very first time we did Vlogmas, is it's essentially the same thing as your radio transmitter. It's the thing that has all of the information about all of the audio files. So you'll need to know that. The other thing that you're gonna have is a trailer episode or a very first episode. And the reason for that is because in order for most podcast directories to list you and say, yes, you can be in our directory, you actually have to have an episode in the directory. So what I would say is you need to, I like recording a trailer directory, a trailer episode. So you say, hey, this is what the podcast is going to be about. You can expect to receive a new podcast every X days, or every Tuesday you can receive a new podcast episode. And so then once you've got that recorded and uploaded to your podcast host, you can take your RSS feed, and I would say submit yourself to Google Podcasts, and that's going to be you can go to podcastmanager.google.com. So podcasts with an S, manager.google.com, and submit there. That'll get you into the Google directory. And then Apple Podcasts is going to be podcastconnect.apple.com. You will need to have an Apple ID for that and to submit to Apple, but you can go ahead and submit podcastsconnect.apple.com, and that will get you into Apple Podcasts. And then the last thing that I would say is Spotify, and you can go to Spotify at podcasters.spotify.com. Sign in. Each one of those things are going to have you fill out some information. It's going to be different, a little bit different information on every one of the directories, but submit those. A lot of times it takes a couple of weeks to maybe get them submitted to the directory, a week or so. So I would say before you plan to get your podcast out there, if you're going to launch your podcast, this coming up, at the beginning of the month, I would say get it in there in the directory ahead of time with your trailer directory, because trailer episode, because it will take you several days to get added into a lot of those apps. Now, Apple Podcasts actually has changed. They're actually been a lot faster at getting things approved lately, so you can get them in fairly quickly. One of the reasons I say that those are really your main directories you need to get into is because a lot of the apps you actually use podcasts that are in the directory from Apple Podcasts. A lot of the apps use that same directory, even if it's not Apple Podcasts. So definitely get yourself in the Apple Podcasts app. And then there's actually a new up and coming directory, kind of an open directory that anyone can use, and a lot of the newer podcast apps are using. It's the Podcast Index, and that can be found over at podcastindex.org. And a lot of the newer apps are actually pulling their episodes and their podcasts from that. So submit over there at podcastindex.org, and that'll get you in a lot of the newer apps too. So if you have any questions about podcast apps or directories, definitely leave them in the links in the comments below, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. And if you have any other questions or things that you want me to answer on the Vlogmas, I'm going to be continuing to do this until the end of the month. So I'm going to be doing a stream every day till the end of the month about podcasting. So you can, if you have a question about podcasting that you want me to answer, definitely go ahead and ask that in the comments below. And I'd be happy to ask that. So happy Vlogmas Day 11, guys.